Hello students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello everybody, and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today we are going to continue our American government series by looking at the judicial branch. Don't forget that there's a link for a fill-in-the-blank worksheet in the description. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize for any mispronunciations ahead of time. I do my best. Alrighty then, let's go now. When the framers wrote the Constitution, they had a big decision to make. Who's going to handle all the legal drama in the country? Enter the Supreme Court, the Beyoncé of the federal court system. But Congress, eager to get in on the action, was left with the job of creating all the lesser courts, the Destiny's Child of the judicial world. Congress got creative and made two kinds of courts: constitutional courts, handling serious business like judicial power of the United States, and special courts, dealing with niche stuff like taxes, because someone's got to do the dirty work. Now, the framers didn't want judges running for office like politicians, kissing babies, and making campaign promises like tough on crime, lenient on parking tickets. So instead, they decided judges should be appointed, not elected. And just to make sure these judges didn't get swayed by things like public opinion or, heaven forbid, logic, they gave them a lifetime gig like tenured professors, but with robes. However, if you're a judge in a special court, sorry, you don't get to be a lifer. You're more like a temp with better outfits. The U.S. court system is like a giant two-for-one deal. You've got the federal court system that covers the whole country, and the state court systems in each of the 50 states. Because hey, who doesn't love a little duplication? Jurisdiction 101. Where does this go? If you're wondering which court gets to hear which case, welcome to the confusing world of jurisdiction. Constitutional courts have the big job of handling cases that involve federal law or admiralty law, aka who owns this ship. Some cases, like fights between people from different states, can be heard in either state or federal courts. It's like getting to choose between Netflix and Hulu. Both will work, but someone might prefer one over the other. And if the case starts in state court, but someone's not feeling the vibe, the defendant can move it to federal court, kind of like switching tables at a restaurant. Levels of court drama: original versus appellate jurisdiction. If you're the court that gets first dibs on a case, you've got original jurisdiction. But if you're the one who gets to review a case that's already been heard, congrats, you've got appellate jurisdiction. Think of it like being the first person to watch a new show, original, versus someone who just binge watches reruns and judges the plot twists, appellate. How judges get their job: the reality TV show we don't get to watch. Federal judges don't have to audition or win a singing competition to get their jobs, although that would be entertaining. Instead, the president nominates them, and the Senate plays judge, jury, and, well, not executioner, but you get the idea. Judges of the Supreme Court and constitutional courts get a lifetime membership to the Judicial Club, and the only way to kick them out is impeachment. Several factors go into picking a judge, like whether the Senate likes them, thanks to something called senatorial courtesy, whether they have any judicial street cred, and of course, their political party. And let's not forget judicial philosophy. You've got the judicial restraint crowd, who are all about sticking to the script, deciding cases based on what the framers meant, and following past rulings like their ancient scrolls. Then you've got the judicial activism team, who take a live-in-the-moment approach, interpreting laws based on current events and modern values, especially when it comes to hot topics like civil rights and social issues. Supreme Court, 9 judges, infinite drama. The Supreme Court is like the Avengers of the judicial world, except instead of fighting aliens, they're fighting over federal law. At the helm, you've got the Chief Justice, the Captain America of the group, along with 8 associate justices. Together, they make the final call on any case involving federal law, because, well, they're the highest court in the land. And thanks to the legendary 1803 case Marbury v. Madison, they also get to decide whether laws are constitutional. That's right, they're not just refereeing the legal game, they're also rewriting the rule book. Jurisdiction, the court's VIP list. Now, the Supreme Court isn't just some small claims court. They've got both original and appellate jurisdiction. But let's be honest, most of their cases come on appeal. It's only when states or diplomats get involved that they roll out the red carpet for original jurisdiction. Most people don't get a direct invite to that party. 100 cases a year, keeping it exclusive. The Supreme Court is kind of like that one super fancy restaurant with a 3-month waiting list. They hear about 100 cases a year. Yeah, that's it. And if you want in, you need a writ of certiorari, basically a court's version of you're invited. This means a lower court has to send up the case file for review. Occasionally, a case sneaks in through a back door called a certificate, which is when a lower court begs the Supreme Court to pretty please help them figure something out. But not just any case makes it to the docket. At least 4 of the 9 justices have to agree to let it in. It's like trying to get into an exclusive club, but you need at least 4 bouncers to nod you through. The process, it's brief, then it's not. Once a case gets past the velvet ropes, each side submits a brief, which is a fancy way of saying, here's a detailed report on why we think we're right. Then both sides argue their hearts out in front of the justices. The justices, after listening, disappear into their chambers to vote, and finally, they release their grand decision in the form of a majority opinion, the official ruling. Each decision is like a tiny legal time capsule, setting a precedent for future cases. But wait, there's more. Sometimes, a justice who's on board with the ruling but has extra thoughts will add a concurring opinion, kind of like a lawyer's version of, yeah, what they said, but let me just add this. On the flip side, if a justice disagrees, they'll write a dissenting opinion. Basically, a formal way of saying, I don't agree with y'all at all. The inferior courts, where most of the work happens, but with less fame. So while the Supreme Court is busy being the rock star of the judicial system, the inferior courts, aka the federal courts under the Supreme Court, are the ones grinding away on most of the federal cases. Think of them as the hard-working roadies who handle all the heavy lifting. There's at least one district court, the federal trial court, in every state, plus the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Guam, and even the Northern Mariana Islands. Because justice never takes a vacation. There are 94 U.S. district courts, and they have original jurisdiction, which means they get the first crack at most federal criminal and civil cases. A federal criminal case is when someone breaks a federal law, and a civil case is your classic non-criminal mess, like when 2 companies get into a fight over a contract, or someone gets mad because their neighbor built a fence 2 inches too far. Appeals courts, for when the Supreme Court got too popular. At one point, the Supreme Court got way too popular, and their case list was getting out of hand. So Congress, in all its wisdom, created the courts of appeals to help lighten the load. We now have 13 of these courts serving 12 judicial circuits across the country. The 13th one, the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, is based in D.C., but has nationwide jurisdiction because it deals with super specialized stuff like patents and international trade. It's kind of like the nerd squad of the appellate system. These courts don't do trials, no new evidence, no surprise witnesses, just good old-fashioned reviews of what's already gone down in the district courts. They sift through the transcripts, ponder the attorney's arguments, and then decide whether to back up the original ruling or tell everyone to do it over again. International trade and other courts, you've probably never heard of. One of the other Article 3 courts, those created by the Constitution, is the U.S. Court of International Trade. As you might guess from the name, it handles civil cases related to trade laws. It's like the referee for all things imports and exports. But wait, there's more. The federal court system also has special courts, or as some like to call them, Article 1's courts, because Congress made them. One of the oldest parts of this is the military court system, which Congress created back in 1789. These courts, called courts martial, handle all the special disciplinary needs of the military. Basically the military's own legal drama. Then, in 1950, Congress decided that the military could use a little oversight and created the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, a civilian-run tribunal. This court gets the final say on serious court-martial convictions, because sometimes the military needs an outside opinion too. And don't forget the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, which handles appeals about veterans' benefits. Basically, if it's military related, there's a special court for it. Suing the US? Better check with Congress. First fun fact, you can't just sue the United States like you would your neighbor who stole your lawn gnome. Nope, the US has immunity, unless Congress decides to allow it. To handle these rare cases, they created the Court of Federal Claims, where people can take their grievances to get some money or redress, the legal version of a refund. And if you're in trouble with the IRS, you're headed to the tax court, where they hear civil cases about tax law. Most of the cases here come courtesy of our friends at the IRS and other Treasury Department agencies. Finally, for those lucky enough to live in U.S. territories like the Virgin Islands, Congress has set up territorial courts, because even paradise needs judges. The District of Columbia, while not technically a state or territory, has its own court system too, because DC likes to be special. Whoop whoop, it's time for a quick recap. The framers of the Constitution basically made the Supreme Court the Beyoncé of the U.S. court system, and then left Congress to create a whole bunch of other less glamorous courts. Think Destiny's Child. These inferior courts do most of the actual work, while the Supreme Court pops in for the final act. Judges get lifetime gigs, unless you're in a special court, in which case you're more like a temp with job security. Meanwhile, cases get passed around different courts, like a legal version of musical chairs, with some courts handling big federal issues and others sorting out niche stuff like taxes and military discipline. And just in case you were thinking of suing the government, you'll need Congress's blessing first, because the US doesn't just go to court on a whim, unlike your neighbor who took your parking spot. There you have it, folks. That is the judicial branch nutshell. Thanks for stopping by Nutshelled History. You'd be criminal if you didn't like or subscribe, and I'd judge you for it. Is that justice? Let us know in the comments down below. See y'all next time on Nutshelled History.